Welcome to the Dark Zone, an adventure racing podcast.
And that was it exactly, Brian. Yes, we're not getting into that race organizing space. We already have incredible race directors throughout the world. So if we can do more support for them in their countries, then that's our goal achieved, because without race directors, we don't have a sport.
Well, for me, the action is the juice. I'm in.
Say the word, Chef.
Let it rip.
Welcome to the Dark Zone Adventure Racing Podcast. This is your host, Brian Gatens, episode 123. That's right, 1, 2, 3. On today's show, we speak to representatives from the International Adventure Racing Association, IARA. That's what we call it on the show. Lisa and Cormac are working on behalf of racers on an international basis, attempting to bring cohesion to the worldwide adventure racing scene. And they do a great job breaking down IARA, where it came from, and most importantly, what it means to the day-to-day racer. So I'm glad to give some time and attention on the Dark Zone to their efforts. I encourage you to see the show notes and listen closely for their websites and information. They're in need of volunteers. And as we know, adventure racing is driven by the volunteer. So thanks for being here. Thanks for listening to the Dark Zone. We're delighted to have you as a listener. We know that your time is important. As we say all the time, if you keep racing, we'll keep talking. Enjoy the episode.
Hello, this is Frank Johnson, and I'm thrilled to announce that adventure racing is coming back to Iowa. The Wild Driftless Adventure Race will be October 4th in the Driftless region of northeastern Iowa, featuring two options, the 9-hour Wild Driftless and the 4-hour Wild Driftless Light. Come and explore the region's rugged beauty and let us help you shed that image of Iowa you have in your head. Gone are most of the cornfields. Instead, you'll be greeted by sheer rock faces, hardwood forests, and crystal clear trout streams. We have fun single-track mountain biking, those famous Iowa gravel roads, Riffley River paddling, and fantastic forest trekking on a course designed to challenge avid racers while also serving as the perfect entry event into the sport. This is an adventurer's adventure race, and we hope to see you there, October 4th, hosted at Camp Iwalu in Strawberry Point, Iowa. Wild Driftless is a proud member of the Wisconsin Adventure Racing Series. Learn more at www.wilddriftless.com.
As listeners of the Dark Zone know, we are big supporters of Ascend Leadership Through Athletics, working with women and girls in Afghanistan and Pakistan. Ascend and their annual Hike for Her, hike and auction is right around the corner, Saturday, May 10th, 2025 in Sky Meadow State Park in Della Plain, Virginia. If you check our show notes, you can see registration information as well as their online silent auction. All are encouraged to follow those links and learn about the good work that Ascend is doing in Afghanistan and Pakistan. And as always, they pay nothing for this spot. We enjoy the work that they do and are proud to support them. We have a new organization on the scene, new-ish, I guess you would say, the International Adventure Racing Association, which we'll call IARA for the purpose of the show today and for them going forward. It's an international group designed for the betterment of adventure racing, and we have two members of IARA here today. We have Cormac McDonald from AR Island and Lisa Despevel, who's a South African adventure racer involved in sports media, on the show to talk about IARA, their goals, their formation, and where they're going. So welcome to the Dark Zone. Delighted to have you both here. As we discussed beforehand, Cormac is going to start us off. Tell us about IARA. Cormac, take it away.
Brian, great to be on the show. A privilege to get an opportunity to speak to you. Firstly, of course, I love the show, and greetings from Ireland. And I guess first and foremost, I'm an adventure racer from Ireland, and I'm involved with the national association that we set up here in Ireland called Adventure Racing Ireland. So what is IARA? IARA is the international voice. It's a new independent international voice to represent the sport of adventure racing. It's an entity that's been created by the AR community, for the sport of adventure racing. And I guess it's also an entity to unite and bring together national associations and the community in the sport from around the world, right? So And then, finally, I guess it's there to help countries establish national associations, and in turn, maybe helping those associations to maybe try and get some funding at that national level for the sport. So it's really to provide that umbrella structure at the international level that a lot of sports, all sports would generally have. But it's an independent voice for the sport of adventure racing internationally.
So I asked the question, and Lisa, I want to come to you in one quick second, but I want to give some clarity to the conversation we're having. You show up to an adventure race and you have maps and you have transition areas and all the planning that goes into it. And very often adventure racers fall into the trap of thinking that there's like the adventure race fairy out there, that it all sort of just happens. But in the background, there's a whole army of race directors and volunteers and everything that goes on in putting a race together, whether it be a 6, 12, 24, 48, or a 10-day race. Is it safe to assume that IARA is designed to work with and to unite those various entities and help everyone work together simultaneously? Am I understanding that correctly? Lisa?
So in a sense, events themselves are created by the race director, and they would bring together all the elements that make the event happen on the ground. IARA is an international sports body. So it'd be like, World Triathlon or the Rugby Federation or something like that. So we sit as a little bit, we sort of at that top, the top tier of the sport. But what we really aim to do is to help bring together the different countries. So within a country, you might have a structure of race directors in that country under their national organization. And that national organization then falls under us. And we try to bring together all those national organizations for the sharing of the stories and the experiences. They getting that information on the ground from their people, from their race directors and participants. And we managed to get then that sharing of the stories and experiences so we can progress and better the sport as a whole. So it's not that we're necessarily, we're not looking there to organize races or to tell race directors how to put on their races and what to do. That happens independently of us.
So do race directors join IARA or do nations join IARA?
Nations join IARA.
Can any nation join, or is there a process to come on board?
There is a process. We have a membership process. So it starts off with that representative body in the country. They fill in an application form that comes through to our membership group. The membership group reviews that, and then they reach out to the people. We set up an interview. We talk to them. We find out about adventure racing in their country, the participants, the races, how their organization is structured. And with some of these national organizations, their members are not individual races. Their members are race directors. It really just depends on the country. So then we go through a review process, and we have various elements that we look at in terms of how is the organization structured, what is their recognition within their country, and according to our criteria, we then award a membership, either a full membership, in which case they're able to vote within the IARA structure. So like now when we have the AGM coming up on the 22nd of January, we then have those full members are able to vote a new committee in. They can vote on the constitution. They can vote on the statutes and guidelines and those kind of elements. We also then have observers. So those are countries that they don't really meet that criteria for full membership. They might just have a sort of loose structure within their country. Their representatives can be observers, so they participate in meetings, they get contacted, within the network of the national structure, but they can't vote. So that's really how we've worked the structure of it.
We also have, a membership category for associate members. And associate members, can be like important kind of, I suppose you might say, coordinating entities in the sport, important elements in the sport that basically are promoting adventure racing, promoting it and maybe supporting it in certain ways. So like the likes of ARWS or, other entities like that would be, they're there to support IARA. But they're not necessarily there as a full member per se. They're there in another capacity, right? Maybe in a commercial capacity or something like that.
Well, to that point, there's adventure racing is fascinating. The idea, it's this confederation of race directors, right? They put on races. Some of those race directors, they affiliate with national organizations that then in turn may affiliate with the IARA. But alongside that too, there's other organizations that maybe organize races. There's other I'm going to say confederacy is not the right word to use. There's other groups in this loose amalgamation of adventure racing. And it sounds like IARA is working to bring those various strands together under a common umbrella of conversation, right? Because there's no governing with IARA, correct? It's not a worldwide governing body. It's a group.
Yeah, no, I would say that it is an association. It's a representative voice. It's there to kind of, to bring together, the different. I would say it's trying to unify some of the policies, some of the actual areas like rules, standards. I've actually been working, Brian, myself in sport for many, many years in the development of sport, and really adventure racing is an unusual sport in the broad scheme, right? Because most sport traditionally has a grassroots structure, which is club-based activities that clubs then in turn link to either regional or national kind of identities. Those national identities generally all hang together off an international association, and that's how the sport is generally kind of managed. So that if you're, example, doing an orienteering kind of race in the US, it's going to be largely very similar event that you're going to be doing in Europe or indeed over in Australia. So you ensure that you've got a consistency of what's happening in the sport in different countries. And that's kind of how the structure of sport, works internationally. In adventure racing, of course, we don't really have a club structure at the actual grassroots level. And so we've got more races happening and events happening and then teams coming together for races. And we need to kind of almost adopt our kind of, structures and our system to kind of facilitate that, right? And so really we have to, IARA is not about copying kind of what other international federations do. It's kind of doing what's best for the sport of adventure racing, right? And it's recognizing that race directors play a fundamental role in the organizing of races, that the actual quality, and that it's important that there's a consistency there for people that are entering the sport for the first time, that there's kind of like, a certain experience that they can try, expect at an entry level race and so on. So that's things like safety, environmental good practice, even, how to actually work with youth in the sport. All of those things are being considered and are being done to kind of, as best can be. Right. And I think that's generally the role for the International Association, is to try and actually share good practice and develop good practice if it doesn't exist. And I think that while adventure racing has kind of been a bit of a maverick in the world of sport, in that it's kind of generally done its own thing. And that's why we love the sport, right? That's why we appreciate it and love it. And we've got to protect that. But we've also got to move the sport on and try and actually make sure that there's opportunities for young people to engage in the sport. We've got to make sure that, that generally that the sport is safe and that it's applying good environmental practices and all of those type of things that we should be doing as we develop in the world.
So there's an expression that it feels like a herding kitten sometimes, right? The hardest thing to do is throw those kittens in a row. Adventure racing, you used the word maverick before. Very often race directors, they'll bring their own philosophy, attitude, ethic into the races that they're putting on. The International Association, have you had internal conversations around how much to standardize and how much to leave independent? And is that like hitting a moving target?
So I think very much we have had those discussions, and we don't want to be a prescriptive organization that says you must do this, you must do that. The joy, as you've said, of adventure racing is that the race directors bring their creativity and their innovation into the events, and they bring their own personality and flair into it. We want that to stay. But within that, you can have best practice and guidelines coming from IARA in ways to improve things within the structure of the event. So let's say environmental practice, for example, of, what do you do with collecting waste in transition areas? And that we can give the guideline to say, do your recycle bins, collect this, make sure that you are taking the recyclables and keeping it separate, or how to dispose of toilet waste and how to dispose. And so we can put out those guidelines. We're not saying you have to do it and here's a policeman looking over your shoulder to do it. But within the structure of the sport, we can look to improve the best ways that we can.
And that's being done through working with the national groups, who then feed that down to their individual member directors. Okay. So that makes a
And
lot
actually
of sense.
also with the race directors, because we have a lot of conversations with race directors who get involved with us, and they've got the on the ground experience, and they're very happy to share things that have worked very well with them that they think other race directors will benefit from. Ways to make things less expensive, to make convenient, to make efficient, and they're very happy to share that. And IARA is almost a medium to help with those conversations around the world.
What are some of the countries that are already members?
Yeah, so we've got 10 member countries so far, Brian. I'll quickly run down through them. Lisa, you might catch a few that I miss, but we've got Brazil and Uruguay, we've got Canada, we've got Ireland, we've got Denmark, we've got Spain, we've got Luxembourg, we've got Finland. Lisa, am I missing a few?
Did you say Czech Republic? We've got Czech
Republic.
Canada, Paraguay, Uruguay.
United States.
United States on the in motion. So they're basically we're working with a few countries that are just working through the process around just their membership process at the moment. So there's still a few. We were only really up and running this year, 2024, Brian, and so really. The first phase of work was about trying to develop that criteria and understanding what was happening in different countries and understanding the different structures that were driving the sport and supporting the sport in different countries. And it's like that as well. Adventure racing has largely operated on a race-based system. So there's not that many countries with national associations, So really, I think when we were going at the very, very start of this process where IARA came from, I think we were able to kind of engage with about 15 countries around the world that had, if you like, structures in place that were able to, either, I suppose having a representative structure at the national level, And you might say, well, why do you need that? Why do you need a kind of a national coordinate, an entity at the national level? And especially, why does adventure racing need it? If we don't have clubs operating at the grassroots, why do you need an NGB or a national association? But I think you still need a race calendar in a country. You need some coordination. You need support for race directors. I know in Ireland, we wouldn't really have a sport. We wouldn't really have many team races, only that we had the association. And we wouldn't even have had our association if we hadn't received help from a number of other established associations out there. So we're now 4 years old, but we got help from other countries that had an entity established. We were able to then follow that track. And as such, we're able to actually, have an insurance policy now and be able to actually coordinate and have training systems in place for race directors and stuff like that, So, it's benefiting the country, in terms of actually keeping the sport alive and actually, creating more races for people to do.
Well, it only appears to make sense, right? I mean, if you enjoy adventure racing and you want the sport to grow, having various bodies at different levels, whether it be local races, regional, national, going into international grouping, I don't see the downside of having a group like IARA existing. Has anyone in talking about the organization pushed back on it? Like, what has been the criticism of the organization? Because there must be some out there.
Brian, there must be. I must say we've had an unbelievable support from countries around the world, and also people volunteering to jump in, whether it's jumping in with working groups that they want to work on a project, they want to work on a safety guidelines, they want to work on environmental guidelines. So we've really had incredible support. I think, at the ground where most races, what they like, they just want to race. They want to go to events, and they don't really care about the politics or the governance structures within the sport. They're happy doing what they've done for the last 35 years. So for us, the actual feel for the person on the ground, people say, well, what's the effect for the racer? For an international structure, in a way that there isn't. If you go and participate in a local triathlon event, you don't necessarily feel the benefit yourself of World Triathlon. But there is, because World Triathlon has an effect on the national structure, which has an effect on the clubs and the training and the everything else that happens below it. So having IARA in existence, what's the benefit? What's the direct benefit for the racer on the ground? Well, nothing that they're going to feel when they enter their local event. But certainly the benefit is for the national structures getting support from us to them, for them within their national sports structures, for us to recognize them, then they get recognition inside their countries, potential funding opportunities, and then with the guidelines and the sharing of good practices and the bringing together for youth development. So that's really where the benefits are. So for you taking part in your local event, no, you won't feel a direct benefit of having IARA in place.
Not every benefit that you get do you feel when it occurs several layers above you. Like, I like the fact, for example, right, that my car works efficiently, right? The tires don't explode, the engine turns over. Far away from my daily existence, there's a body that makes certain that those cars are safe. I don't feel the effect of that body except I get in my car and I turn the key in the ignition. So what you're saying is that for the local racer who, and this is a leisure time activity, right? You work all day, you're busy at work all week. On a Saturday morning, you go to a race. They don't feel the impact of an international organization, but that impact still exists.
Yeah.
Correct. Yes. I love your analogy. That's it exactly.
Thank you. Cormac.
It's pretty essential to have some voice and have a structure that represents the sport at international level, Brian. Even though, the sport of adventure racing hasn't had it, of course it's had, the likes of ARWS and kind of really big kind of, race series is happening and stuff. And this has been all fantastic. It's great to have races, but it's really essential to have a representative body that is independent, that is representing the actual voice of the community and is expressing kind of, we say what the sport is and how it's actually developing and evolving, and that doesn't really exist. It's never existed. And there's never really been any connection between countries. So you've seen, it's been a real privilege to see and get a chance to experience and see what's happening in Denmark, for example, and hear how they really are growing their kind of membership bases and their races, or what's happening in Brazil, how they're actually shaping their youth's work and their, various different things they're doing in the sport, right? And how that can actually kind of really benefit other countries if they get to hear about that. But more importantly, what we faced at the very start of this project was the sport was being taken over by, an entity called World Obstacle Court Racing. That's where, this came from. The community reacted and said, well, no, the sport of World Obstacle doesn't know anything about adventure racing, doesn't have any history in that sport. There's no relationship between Ninja and obstacle racing, OCR, and the sport of adventure racing. And, we're not, we want an entity that can represent the sport of adventure racing. And so that's where this came from. If we don't have some way of managing and protecting our sport and representing it, well, then others in turn will come and actually look to take over the sport.
So it's one of these examples of like you have to define your own narrative, right? And if you don't fill the vacuum, someone else will fill it on top of you. And so with the World Obstacle and the Ninja, which was cooking around for several years, you're saying that has the IARA is a direct downstream effect of that desire that another group talked about adventure racing as if they had a chance to quote unquote own it. And IARA came out and say, whoa, we're going to build an international federation of our own because we don't want someone else to define who we are.
So that's it. Well, that's it exactly. And what actually happened is during a meeting in February 2023 that was called by World Obstacle, that was when the adventure racing, there were like 100 adventure racers who were participating in this meeting. And they said, no, actually, we're not forming a technical committee. We don't want to be under World Obstacle. And I said, well, I said to the World Obstacle president, Ian Adamson, I said, well, have you taken a poll from adventure racing countries to find out who actually wants to be within your organization? He said, no, well, why don't you do it? And so that's how Cormac, Lars, Damon, and myself ended up as the Adventure Racing Working Group. And we did that. We reached out to countries, we networked. It was a incredibly exciting and it was very rewarding just to make contact and reach out to all these countries. And we set up an international poll. And within countries, people polled the participants, or the national organizations put in their poll votes. And it came out that the communities and the adventure racing world wanted to create their own independent organization. And so, in fact, we actually have World Obstacle and their desire to take over the sport and to own the sport of adventure racing. We have them to thank for bringing all the countries together to say, well, actually, we want to create our own organization to represent our own unique sport. And this has now led to the formation of IARA.
Organizations, they come to light for various reasons, right? Some are proactive, some are reactive. It appears with the World Obstacle, and World Obstacle, by the way, if you listen to the Dark Zone, thanks for being a listener. And if you want to talk to me, feel free to reach out. Because I think they have a side that they may want to make their case to the public, right? And they have the right to do that if they choose to do so. And I don't want you to either make their argument for them or explain their behavior. But in your own working on this, what did you feel was the benefit behind their choices to do that? Like, why did adventure racing kind of fall on their radar? I mean, ninja racing, obstacle course, I get all of that. And that's a completely separate sport and more power to you, right? You enjoy doing that, go get them. But in your conversations around this, like what drove them in that direction? Have they shared that with you?
Brian, I guess my initial reaction when I was listening to all of this was just, I was bewildered that there was just no consultation. I just couldn't believe that there wasn't any engagement or discussion really around this. That it almost appeared like as if it just happened that World Obstacle, or FISO, as it's being also called, kind of almost just kind of took over the sport, and that was it. So that was all I had ever heard about it, really, until that call, that Zoom call back in 2023, where it was almost being presented as we're establishing this new committee and this is what's happening. Yeah, to answer your question, I have no clue. I have no clue what goes behind the thinking. I presume it's all to do with the numbers and the actual races and the actual kind of the business of sport and all of that. And I do believe that there was there's good sentiment there as well, that they did see that the sport needed an international federation, and that they did believe that there was no other federation in place. And the easiest way to do that was to actually piggyback on an existing federation, right? And so having a federation in place that was established, and that the sport of adventure racing, the discipline or the individual sport, could sit into, that to a certain degree made a certain amount of sense. And I don't think there would have been anyone challenging that, but there was just no consultation and there was no opportunity to even engage with a conversation. It was a takeover. And it just was presented as a fait accompli. And I just couldn't believe that countries have national associations and that the sport operates, and that there wasn't really any opportunity to kind of, to engage in that conversation until it was presented like that.
Got it.
So the background to it really was that the FISO president, Ian Adamson, Ian was an incredibly accomplished adventure racer. He won multiple, eco challenges and world championships, all sorts of things. So, a really accomplished adventure racer. And he had tried in years past to create an adventure racing association. And I don't know what happened with some of the early things, but certainly by the 20-teens, he was in contact with a couple of adventure racers, and they were talking about creating an organization. And so that's where the conversations were, but not once were any of those conversations with actual national adventure racing bodies. They weren't with the countries, they weren't with the communities. So, as Cormac says, I think there was good sentiment there, definitely in the beginning, but then maybe it was a numbers thing that, I don't know whether it's Olympic aspirations or IOC things and numbers that are needed and countries that are needed. I don't know what it evolved into, but then it kind of turned into the mess that we jumped into.
So is this an ongoing issue with them, or does IARA sort of put this issue to bed?
Yeah, so I think IARA has kind of put it to bed a bit. We've moved on. We're focused on establishing the new entity, trying to build something, a startup really from the ground, and getting great support. As Lisa said, I think there's been no pushback. There's been nothing but positivity really in terms of what we're trying to do. Everyone at the country see it. Some of the big race organization, series, organizers really see it. So there's a lot of support. In terms of World Obstacle, they continue to, as they say, represent the sport of adventure racing, as well as World, obstacle course racing and Ninja. And they've pursued that as well with their amalgamation with World Pentathlon, which is something that is almost a second story in a sense that has happened over the last number of months. World Obstacle have been amalgamating with the bigger entity, which is World Pentathlon, and they are bringing the sport of adventure racing with them. And we were able to, make a stand on that and to try to raise the awareness around the issue, which was that adventure racing didn't really want to be part of World Obstacle, and that adventure racing should be dropped from this, from the definition of what their combined sport would be. And to a certain degree, we succeeded in achieving that by getting adventure racing dropped from Emotion at their recent World Summit or World Congress. But it's only a small victory, really. We know that World Obstacles still continue to have adventure racing on their website and continue to promote the sport. And, they will, whatever World Obstacle do, that's their business. But we'll get on and try to do the best we can for the sport of adventure racing and for all the members that come and join IARA.
Well, there's two sides to it, right? There's the reactive approach to World Obstacle, the choices that they were making, that we're going to establish the sport, we're going to go and do this, and then IARA was a outgrowth of that. Now you're in some ways you're almost like the dog that caught the car, right? Now that you've wrestled the control, the conversation, the narrative back in your direction. Now you have to do stuff, and now you have to live up to the idea of being a worldwide body. And you're in a unique position, right? Because you're not a governing body, right? There's no sanctions. There's none of that. You serve to unite a very disparate and wide sport. And we mentioned good practice, sustainability, inclusion activities, all of that. What are some of the topics that you're staying away from? You can't be all things to all racers. What's just not on your radar? What's an independent race director's thing to figure out on their own that you're just not getting involved in as a group?
I think first and foremost, we don't have any role in race organizing. We don't have any role in coordinating any series, any races. We're certainly not a regulatory body. We're not issuing, regulations and requirements and what have you. So we're not there to overly impose, I would say, but we are there to actually kind of to try and look at opportunities for developing good practice across countries that can be shared and disseminated across countries afterwards. And so that will improve the sport, that will improve the experience for racers, that will help race directors to do the great job that they do, that will, hopefully help in the promotion of the sport, that will lead more people into the sport. Yeah. And so really, it's not about getting into that space of, national calendars or races or organizing that stuff. It's about it's about a level above that.
That was it exactly, Brian. Yes, we're not getting into that race organizing space. We already have incredible race directors throughout the world. So if we can do more support for them in their countries, then that's our goal achieved, because without race directors, we don't have a sport.
So the International Association being new, it sounds like you're really very ground up. You used the word startup before. We heard that word before. And so most likely you don't have an answer to this question yet, but I want to say it for this conversation, a future conversation. Aside from the grassroots planning that you're putting on right now, has any conversation happened around innovation in the sport, or are you not there yet?
Yeah, I think, Brian, it's fair to say we're not there yet. But I think, what we are thinking about when we think about that term innovation is, how do we design IARA so that it's meeting the needs of our community? And how do we create an entity that could work that could actually kind of really deliver value to the adventure racing community. And, so like 2024 has been a startup year for the new association. And it, you could nearly look on it as a bunch of people getting together online from around the world and getting together, moving into a house for the first time with very little furniture, with no lights, with very little. And we were basically just starting how to actually kind of, how to organize our meetings, how to get organized as a committee, how to start setting some priorities for ourselves, and how to develop an entity in itself, how to develop a brand, how to get websites up and running and all that type of stuff. And indeed, then how we get our membership system in place, and what kind of project areas are emerging from countries as being priority areas that they want looking at, And so I think as we go into 2025 coming, which will be the first formal year of the new association, that really is about starting to kind of, pick off a number of projects, establish working groups that can focus on different things, and actually go and start producing value. So start to actually run some awareness raising or, a good practice sharing events, maybe start developing some guidelines in certain areas, and let's start to prove our worth, But I think we'll try and do that by engaging with the community in an adventure racing way, bringing small groups of people together, letting them working on projects, and, being able to engage with the association in a flexible way. So that's kind of that's what we're thinking about for the innovation area.
Would the typical adventure racer have a direct connection to the International Association, or is that mostly through the race directors and through the international group? Is that through the race directors and through the national organizations? Should the common adventure racer, should the regular adventure racer be following along and paying attention? Like, where can they go to find out about that?
So if I answer that, Brian, in many ways, we do have contact with the individual adventure racer. We get contacted by racers who say to us, I am passionate about safety and my expertise is in rivers. Can I assist in contributing to safety guidelines and best practice? So that's really the interaction that we have with individuals. And then those individuals volunteer to join up with working groups. But on the whole, we actually communicate with national associations. So we might put out a request to the national associations and say, we have a project coming up where we're focusing on safety guidelines. If you have any members of your community who would like to jump into this working group for the next 6 to 12 weeks, please can they contact us? We can do it their expertise and experience to make our guidelines the best that they possibly can be, because that will be shared all around the board. So generally, we communicate with national organizations. We do have a Facebook page and an Instagram profile at International Adventure Racing. We have a website at internationaladventureracing.org. And so we post news there and we post on our social media, and that's sort of our public communication. We also send out media releases to Adventure Racing Media, which they then publish and share on their platforms as well.
So, Brian, just to add to that, to say that, IARA needs the adventure racing community now to back it, to get involved with it, to make it a success. I mean, we're only just adventure racers ourselves in our own countries. What, we're giving back to the sport, like the way you're giving back to the sport by way of running a great podcast. We get involved, we've enjoyed the sport of adventure racing for many years. I've been involved with, doing lots of races. I've been involved with organizing races. This is another way of giving back, right? So that you're giving back to the future of the sport, and you want to see it grow and develop more. You want to see it, young people coming into the sport. You want to see more races kind of happening, and better quality races maybe, or indeed you want to make sure that the environment is being looked after in our sport and all those things, right? So it's a way of giving back, but there's no question that it's not going to be, it's going to be on the community to make this a success. If the community do not embrace it, if the different national associations, and if the sport doesn't see an opportunity here to really get behind this association, it's not going to work. It's just simply not going to work. And so it has a need for, web designers, graphic designers. We need data analysts. There is no one capturing any data around the sport of adventure racing, if you like, in terms of what's happening in that area. But we need even people with experience in legal areas, people experience in safety, in environment, in all these project areas. People that have skills, and our community has a rich depth, I suppose a depth of all, skills in all of those areas, because we're a sport that has got quite a lot of mature participants, a lot of professional people, a lot of people that are even retired, that have got skills and knowledge that can share and help, So it definitely needs all of that. And we, our challenge is to try and make it open so that basically people with skills can actually come forward and actually offer their help, and we'll engage them on projects and get them involved in different ways to help it grow and develop. Because, as I said, it is at a startup stage.
We said time and time again that volunteers are the heart and soul of adventure racing, right? And very often we think of volunteers at the racing level, right? The person who's manning a transition area, they're driving a van, they're dropping off bicycles. What you're saying there, Cormac, is the idea that same spirit of volunteerism, which is woven through our sport, right? It's no volunteers, no sport. Is that you're saying that if somebody has a skill set that they think that they could apply to the International Association, that they should feel free to dive into that and to reach out to you, which is separate from the contact point of the individual racer reaching out to you for guidance or help. That's a national organization conversation. Instead, there's this international group out there that is in need of assistance as you're building this thing from the ground up.
One of the benefits of adventure racing is, yes, IARA is an international association, but our sport is small and we do know each other. So we are an approachable international association because we're very happy to be approached by people who say, hey, I can help with this. So soon, when you get to this, when you start discussing this, please give me a call. I would really like to get involved. So, well, we're big enough, small enough that we can do things like that.
So I had a question that I had written down here, the idea of adventure racing, how it's modified and it's changed over the last decade, 15, 20 years from a global perspective. And I think we somewhat answered that question through our conversation, but I still want to put it out there. Clearly, the need for an international association, with the world obstacle issue being put to the side, is the fact that there's enough races going on in enough parts of the world that there's enough interest to have a global group. That being said, what do you see as being a trend in racing? Like, are there other countries that you're trying to bring on board? Are there other groups you're trying to work with? Like, as you round out who you are as a group and as you think about the growth of the sport itself, what other directions you think you want to go in? Or are you sort of just, listen, Bri, we got a website going, we got some volunteers, leave us alone, let us do our work a little bit here ourselves?
Yeah, just off the bat, what comes to my head there is the pathway into the sport and, the pathways through the sport and, really concerning ourselves with the person that's coming to the sport for the first time, what their experiences are like at a beginner, at an entry level point into races. What are the races that are there for at entry level for someone that's coming for that first time experience where they're really facing kind of, a multi-sport race with navigation, in some cases with the team, usually with teammates, but it's that transition into the sport, and then it's like how you progress and how you can progress in the sport. And every sport needs to have some clarity around that pathway, right? How someone can actually get an entry point in and move their way up. And, in some cases, and the sport of adventure racing is fantastic because there is a clear sight to world championship level nearly for teams, that there's such an openness in the sport for teams to be able to enter international races and go and do expedition races and indeed get ready and train and work hard to actually go and participate in the world championship race, right? So that's a great sight, but I think that there's more to be done around just having opportunities for people to enter into the sport at that beginner level and to have that sight. And you have to bear in mind, Brian, that the sport does not have any club structure at the actual grassroots or community level in any country. So for someone that wants to get involved with the sport, they have to get to hear about events. They have to try and actually find teammates. They have to try and actually find out about the sport and get ready for it. So it's quite difficult for a lot of people to really engage at that start level point. And so I think that's an area for me that I think needs clarity, right? It needs that. And it needs not just in one country. If they're doing that very well in any country like Brazil or in Canada or Denmark or wherever, well, we need to almost come replicate some of that and see that maybe happening in other countries as well, so that it's consistent. Yeah.
Yeah, I think to that point too, you're right. The complexity of getting into the sport is rather challenging, right? You ticked off all the barriers, right? The gear, the navigation, the teammates, the time, the distance, the training. There's all those things. I think, and this is me, getting at not really a soapbox, but pointing out an idea. One point of help that would be tremendous for adventure race directors is working with the permitting organizations that give access to land. Whether it be how you get access to a national park or to a private facility or something like that, like those best practices, because so many race directors, when I have them on the dark zone, the hardest challenge they have is getting access to the facilities that they want to use, whether it be a lake, whether it be a mountain range, private land versus government land. And so I think an example of a working group would be like best practices for working with your local government agencies. And that's a really important thing to put together, because that, for me, that's a huge barrier for race directors. I know many race directors that have these great locations for races, but they can't get anyone to give them permission to use them. So that's one thing. That's a barrier entry I see as race directors as they want to grow the sport, right? You want to bring in the younger racers, the newer racers on one hand, and you want the race directors to have the opportunity to build these amazing courses, which is really complex sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So one of the benefits of having an international association like IARA is that you also have race directors in countries where they don't have national structures. We've been contacted by some of those race directors who are putting on races, and they need some kind of acknowledgement or recognition of their existence.
Gotcha.
So when they try to get land permission or to go to one of their national parks, we can write a letter saying, this guy is a race director in the sport of adventure racing. This is what the sport of adventure racing is. We are the International Adventure Racing Association, and this guy is known to us as a race organizer.
So rather than a private citizen just showing up to a permitting office and saying, listen, I'm this guy, I want to put a race on, you say, I'm this guy. I have found this race directing group. I belong to this national organization, and here's the international group behind it. And I'm legitimate, and I will use this land responsibly because I have these groups that support me in my work.
Correct. And he can even present, here are the guidelines that come from the International Association in terms of environment and how I will respect the land. And these are the practices we're putting in place to not transfer organisms from one water catchment area to another water catchment area.
Right. Right. So it sounds like there's a lot of, as you're going through the process of building international association, clearly there's the choice paralysis, right? There's so many things you have to work on that you almost sometimes end up working on nothing. Hence, that's where the working groups come from. But as you get rolling and as you pick up volunteers and other groups in other countries come on board and you clarify your mission, there'll be a lot more focus on those various areas. Now, you mentioned the 22nd, you have a general meeting. What will happen at that?
So the main function of the annual general meeting is that it's an opportunity to vote in the new committee. It's also to hear about what happened in 2024. The members will also be voting on the Constitution and voting in the member statutes. So that's the primary function of it. Just to give you a bit of insight as to how we structured the sort of the structure of the organization. So we have a committee with 4 primary roles. So that's like chairperson, admin, media PR, and treasurer. We then have 2 general positions. At the moment, membership is still one of our core focuses. So that's with one of the general positions is very much still a focus on membership. And the other general position is also tasked with working groups. So we like to work like an adventure racing team where we have, say, a working group of 4 people. We do like 4. It works in the sport. And those people work together on something. We all, with adventure racers are often busy people. We have lives and works and families and training and participation in events. And that makes it a heavy load for people to volunteer and then be dumped with a whole lot of stuff. So if it's shared within a group, it makes it a lot easier and you've got a couple of brains coming together. What we're looking at doing this year is instead of trying to recruit a whole lot of people to do a whole lot of things, is we've asked countries for priorities on what aspects they think we need to look at. And we also work through that as we go through the year. We then create working groups, and the committee positions and the general members, they They are sort of overseeing working groups and helping to put them together. And the other aspect is putting those working groups within a defined period of time. So we might say, okay, well, we want to do river safety guidelines, and we're going to give ourselves 8 weeks for that. A working group gets set up, and people with experience and interest in that create this sort of 4-person working group. They then work on this document, create that, and boom, it's done. So it allows us to draw in many people from outside of the sort of year-long working structure of the organization. They can contribute, and then they're out and that task is complete. And then we work on the next task. So that's very much how we have been structured, because there are many people who want to get involved and help, but also many people can't commit to being on a committee working throughout the whole year because they have other commitments.
You feel that having a hyper-focused short time span, say, listen, there's the topic, we're giving ourselves 4, 8, 12 weeks. You get it, you put it together, you give it to the group, and it doesn't just wallow, it doesn't just die in committee hell, right? It just sits there for a year and you run out of gas on it. Okay, Cormac.
So, Brian, just for the AGM, I think a big part of what IARA, it's one of its policy areas really is openness and transparency in everything we do, right? And so anybody can come to that with the power of Zoom and the ability of people to actually join online, online conference calls. People can join from anywhere in the world, right? And, I realize it mightn't be the most riveting of topics, but nonetheless, you get to hear what's happening, what IARA has been doing, but also, you'll hear about the countries that have national associations, and you'll hear about some of the things that they're voting on. Like, in this case, it's our first time we have an AGM, so there's not going to be that much to actually vote about on. We just need to adopt our new constitution. And we need to basically also adopt our membership statutes. And we're going to be talking about our budget for 2025 and, things like that around priorities for 2025. But generally, it's a coming together. And, for everything we do, we have an openness. We'll publish all of the minutes for all of our meetings and have those up on our websites. And people can come, and we'll have open meetings during the year where anyone can join and just hear what's going on. And if they want to bring something, they can bring that, and they can communicate. So we want that openness with the adventure racing community, and people, should feel absolutely welcome to actually come along and listen at the AGM. But as I said, it mightn't be for everyone.
Yeah, it's the God bless you. We're just about 40 minutes into our recording, and if you're still listening, Adventure Racers, thank you for hanging in there this long. The things that happen in the background are necessary to give us a great experience in the front. Right. And if not for those conversations, those things that happen in rooms that aren't always enthralling and fascinating, without those conversations, you don't get to have great experiences. Right. And that's the point that you're making is it's not an enthralling meeting, but it's necessary for the growth and the continuation of the sport.
Absolutely.
Thank you both for coming on the Dark Zone. Before I let you go, is there anything that I did not ask about the International Association that you want to make clear to our listeners, or do you feel that we covered it all?
You've covered it beautifully. Thank you.
No, thank you, Brian. Perfect.
All right, folks, another episode of the Dark Zone. Thanks for hanging in there for this one. If you're still listening and you make it this far, and the first 10 people that email me at brian@ardarkzone.com, I will send them a sticker. That's right. If you made it this far, if you're that into IARA and you're still listening the entire time, the first 10 people who email me, include your address, and send me that information, and I will send you a Dark Zone sticker for your commitment to adventure racing. I love it. Thanks for being a listener. Thanks for being here. If you like what you are enjoying here in the Dark Zone, head over to your platform of choice and like, click, and subscribe. They like when you do that. It makes the algorithm happy. It gets me more listeners. I don't know. It doesn't really matter to me. Whoever listens, listens. It's great to have you here. And I really don't quite know our listener base. I know there's a lot of you out there from what the numbers tell me. But once again, thanks for being here. Thanks for listening to the Dark Zone. You keep racing, and we'll keep talking. Be safe.